Johnny Carson was the face of late-night TV for many years. With his charm, wit, and great timing, he made everyone in America laugh every night. It wasn't always so easy behind the scenes, though. There were times when even his managers were shocked. There were awkward interviews, fights behind the scenes, jokes that went too far, and episodes that were hidden in plain sight. Here are the 14 most shocking and awkward parts of The Tonight Show that the producers thought we would forget. Johnny's childhood and early work. This is where John William Carson was born on October 23, 1925. He became the king of late nights without any competition. Their names were Ruth Elizabeth Carson and Homer Lloyd Kit Carson. His mother was a housewife, and his father ran a power company. The family moved around a lot before they settled down in Norfolk, Nebraska, when Johnny was 8 years old. This town would have a big impact on his early years. When Carson was 12, he found a book about magic that got him really interested in shows. Soon after, he bought a magic set and began performing tricks as Great Carson. He did his first paid show at the Norfolk Rotary Club when he was 14 years old. After that, he had fun at church socials and his mom's bridge club. Carson joined the U.S. Army during World War II. His job was to be a midshipman in the V-12 program at Millsaps College and Columbia University. He wasn't in battle, but he entertained the troops on the USS Pennsylvania with Eddie, a ventriloquist dummy. This was the start of his long-lasting ability to get people interested. Carson went back to Norfolk, and then to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln after the war. Carson graduated in 1949 with a major in speech and acting and a minor in radio. His senior thesis was about how to write funny jokes. It was written in the form of taped skits and analysis, which showed that he had a good understanding of how jokes work for the first time. Carson's first job as a radio host was with WOW Radio in Omaha, where he hosted a morning show with funny banter. It was 1951 when Carson moved to Los Angeles. He worked as an announcer for KNXT, giving station IDs and weather reports. Even though it was quiet, it paid off when he got his own show, Carson's Cellar, with characters and bits that would be used again on The Tonight Show. When he filled in for comedian Red Skelton, it was his big break early on. He impressed network execs so much that they gave him his own short variety show, The Johnny Carson Show. After that, he was the host of the game show Who Do You Trust?, whose quick wit and banter with his guests made him surprisingly well known across the country. He took over The Tonight Show from Jack Paar in 1962 and did it for 30 years. Carson changed late-night TV with his quick wit, perfect timing, and ability to get the best out of his guests. Carson made characters that people still remember, like Karnak the Magnificent and Aunt Blabby, and his speeches were something that millions of people did every night. Carson was a very scary person. Carson won 6 Emmys and a Peabody Award. In 1987, he was welcomed into the Television Academy Hall of Fame. Carson was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1992 and an award from the Kennedy Center in 1932. Carson was respected even after he retired in 1992. David Letterman and Conan O'Brien, who took over for him, said that Carson was the person they looked up to. Johnny Carson died on January 23, 2005, at the age of 79. He left a legacy that will continue to impact American TV and comedy for years to come. Carson was still highly regarded after he retired in 1992. David Letterman and Conan O'Brien, who took over for him, said that Carson was the person they looked up to. Johnny Carson died on January 23, 2005, at the age of 79. He left a legacy that will continue to impact American TV and comedy for years to come. About Johnny's personal life, Carson's charm lit up the living rooms of millions of people, but his real life was much more difficult than what he showed on TV. Carson was married 4 times during his career. He rose to fame, ruled, and fell from fame with each marriage. Each one had its own ups and downs. He got married for the first time to Joan Jody Merrill Walcott, whom he met at Penn State. They got married in 1949 and had 3 kids, Christopher, Corey, and Richard. But success came quickly and cruelly. As Carson's fame grew, their marriage fell apart. A drunk fight turned into a cold silence in their marriage. Biographers say that they split up in 1963, which is also the year that Carson started his famous job on The Tonight Show. Tragically, their son Richard died in a car accident in 1991. There was a tragedy that Carson didn't talk about much, but sources say it hit him hard. Joanne Copeland, his second wife, used to be a model and TV host. In 1963, they got married, and she pushed him to work harder as the host of The Tonight Show. But the light from the spotlight was too strong to stand. The marriage only lasted until 1972, when Joanne said that Carson was mentally distant, which was something that other people who knew him said too. Carson married another model, Joanna Holland, later that same year. After moving The Tonight Show to California, things got tough between them. They used to live in New York with her son. Because he was so focused on being perfect, he worked long hours and didn't have time for his family. They split up in 1985, and Joanna died in 2025. Alexis Moss was his fourth and last wife. They got married in 1987. Their relationship was less intense and loud than the ones he had before. Carson stopped working in 1992 and lived quietly with Alexis in Malibu, where he read, sailed, and did other things in his later years. According to producer George Schlatter, the real love of Johnny's life was Alex. Carson was known for being very private, even though he was famous. Henry Bushkin, who was his lawyer and confidant for a long time, said that he was kind, funny, and giving some days and rude, cold, and heartless others. Carson once joked, "I'd probably have a great marriage if I had given as much to it as I did to The Tonight Show." This line showed how self-aware and sad he was about his marriage. While everyone laughed, there was a man who fought to connect with others. He gave his all to his work, but kept his heart hidden. His relationships were brilliant, tense, and in the end, a quiet search for peace. Carson didn't get too close to people even when he was married. For all that he was charming in public, he was mentally distant and angry all the time at home. His friends said that he was the kind of person who could be with a lot of people and still feel completely alone. Carson stayed away from politics on TV, but when he wasn't there, his opinions were clear and unfiltered. He once told people who didn't like his jokes that they were probably saying something worse at home. He saw a hint behind the public's act of goodness. In more ways than one, Johnny Carson was a paradox. He made everyone laugh, but he stayed in his own little world and didn't say much. The man at the desk was smart but hard to understand. This is what made his story even more memorable. 14 of the most shocking moments. Late-night TV star Johnny Carson may be the king of those moments. But even in his own show, producers had a hard time keeping them secret. It wasn't a mistake. They were honest and made me feel very uncomfortable. There were 14 times that really rocked the studio that most people didn't even notice. 1. The episode with the band. One episode of The Tonight Show is so well known that it's become late-night legend. Starcrate says this strange show only showed once and then disappeared. No repeats, transcripts, official lists, or video that has been saved. Many years of guesswork by media historians have been made because NBC never officially acknowledged that it happened. There were rumors about what happened. Some say the producers had to stop the show because of a terrible guest appearance, which could have been a celebrity meltdown or a racist rant. Others say that a crash behind the scenes made its way into the live show and left Carson clearly shaken and unable to recover. Carson is usually very calm, but he was said to be so upset that NBC executives quickly canceled the whole show, afraid that the network's image will be hurt. The most scary thing about this time is the complete silence that followed. Other awkward or controversial parts of the show were either cut or put away in a discreet way, but this one was forgotten. All the efforts to hide it made it even more strange, and now it's just a footnote in the history of TV. Fans have been wondering what happened that night for years, but no one who was there has ever given them any solid information. TV station NBC tried to hide the lost Johnny Carson show. There is a video that delves into this haunting mystery and puts together theories and archival signs that point to a moment that was so unstable that not even Carson's legendary calmness could keep it from falling apart. There could be an incident, sabotage, or something even more personal. It's still a mystery what happened, making it one of the scariest and least solved cases in late-night history. 2. The mess caused by Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers and Johnny Carson worked together, but they were also a power couple on late-night TV. Early in Rivers' career, Carson praised her and famously told her on air in 1965, "You're going to be a star." Over the years, she became a regular guest and then his permanent guest host, taking over when he was away. Things changed, though, in 1986. Rivers became the first woman to host her own late-night show when she took an offer from the new Fox network. She didn't tell Carson until the deal was almost done, though. Rivers later said that she didn't want to risk her job on The Tonight Show too soon because she thought the deal would fall through. However, when the news got out before she could talk to Carson about it, she called him and he hung up on her. They did not talk again. She could no longer talk to Carson, and he would not let her on The Tonight Show ever again. He wouldn't talk to her even when they saw each other in public. The producers were shocked by how harsh his criticism was, and the fight became one of the most famous quiet breakups in TV history. Rivers didn't come back to The Tonight Show until 2014, which was almost 50 years after her first show and a long time after Carson died. The third fight was Wayne Newton's. It was more than just a matter of pride for Wayne Newton to be mad at Johnny Carson. There were almost punches thrown during the fight. Carson started making fun of Newton's manhood every night in the 1970s, making Newton look like he wasn't feminine or gay. Newton tried to take it in stride at first, but the jokes kept coming. They were said every night, and other comedians finally picked them up. Newton finally stormed into NBC's Burbank offices, where he found Carson meeting with producer Fred Dordova, and asked for a moment to talk alone. He had been trying to get in touch with Carson secretly for a year and a half. What happened next became a late-night story. Because Carson is known for being cold, Newton told him, "Cut out all these jokes on me and they'll cut right out or I'll kick your ass." Carson didn't say sorry and never had Newton on again. Years later, Newton said that Carson was a mean person and that the gags were cruel on purpose to hurt his image. He even said that Carson's power was to blame for the nasty rumors about ties to the mob, which led to a case against NBC. The reaction was so strong that Newton stopped appearing on The Tonight Show for no apparent reason, and the two never got back together. 4. Charles Grodin's challenge on air. Satirist and actor Charles Grodin went on The Tonight Show on September 5, 1990, and gave what became the most cringe-worthy interview in late-night history. Grodin's deadpan, dry wit did talk show visits that were more like performance art, and walked a fine line between mean and funny. But he went too far this time. Around the middle of the episode, Grodin asked Carson a question. "Do you care about your friends at all?" It wasn't asked with a nudge or a wink. It was asked in a tough way. Carson was shocked and gave a cold, choppy answer that made the room go silent. There was excitement in the air. Grodin didn't look away. He kept going after Carson's smooth exterior and the show's dull pace. What began as a small, strange issue quickly turned into a real ego clash. People in the crowd weren't sure if they should laugh or breathe. Carson, who made a living by making people feel better when they were embarrassed, looked clearly upset. According to Splice Today, producers even thought about cutting the segment from future reruns because they thought it would damage The Tonight Show's carefully constructed image. However, Carson let the whole thing play. Fans still watch the clip and think it's a strange moment when the king of late night was caught off guard on his own show. Not because of a scandal, but because of a surprise guest who had the nerve to question why the show even existed. It's both an act and the truth, and it's all uncomfortable. 5. Oliver Reed versus Shelley Winters. In late-night history, Shelley Winters made it on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. Oliver Reed, a British actor, started making sexist and sexual comments in 1975. He talked about women's jobs and how they looked. Winters, who was known for being quick-witted and not putting up with sexism, didn't think twice. She got up, grabbed her drink, and threw it right into Reed's face around the middle of the bit. People in the room gasped. Carson, who is usually the voice of reason, looked upset as the tension in the studio hit sky-high levels. The moment was so intense that the producers later took out the most controversial parts of the piece from later airings so as to protect the show's good name. But the original broadcast was still there, and clips of the scene have been posted online, turning the event into a mythical showing of live TV shit. Winter's defiance on air wasn't an unplanned move. It was time to make up. 6. Animal chaos. Joan Embersey's weekly animal appearances were never a sure thing. But on a 1970s episode of The Tonight Show, they got completely out of control. Embery showed a monkey that suddenly grabbed a guest's hand. It wasn't hard enough to hurt, but it was enough to make everyone in the room laugh nervously. The snake she was showing slithered out of its handler's hands and started to move across the stage on its own. Soon after, Johnny Carson, who is known for being scared of strange animals, could be seen shaking and moving away, clearly upset. People in the crowd gasped, and the crew rushed to keep it under control. Carson tried to calm down, but it was clear that he was upset. In the end, the section was cut from later reruns, with only the busiest seconds left out to keep the show's shine. Even though Joan Embersey's visits were always a hit because they were casual and fun, this show was one of the few times that animal chaos really took over the set and showed Carson's real fear. The Zaza Gabor cat joke is number 7. It's one of the best stories ever told on The Tonight Show, but it most likely never happened. People have said for years that Zaza Gabor brought a cat on The Tonight Show and asked Johnny Carson, "Would you like to pet my pussy?" Carson is said to have said, "Sure, just move the damn cat." The joke has been told many times in comedy, late-night legends, and online forums. But here's the thing. This conversation was never shown on camera, written down, or officially broadcast. Most experts and fans today think it's just a story. And it may be an example of the Mandela effect, which is when people remember something clearly even though it didn't happen. In some versions of the story, Raquel Welch or Jane Fonda are even given the moment. The myth was probably made stronger by Carson's image as a cheeky double entendre comedian. But after discussions that were recorded and interviews with people who looked back, the instant was never shown. The joke lives in your head, not on tape. 8th. Carson doesn't remember his speech. Carson went on The Tonight Show on December 14, 1988, ready to give his usual routine. First, though, something went wrong. In the crowd, a beeper went off, which threw him off. Then producer Freddie DeCordova came in from the back to try to get the time right. Carson was totally out of sync after the 2 interruptions. Once more he tried to start his joke, but he couldn't remember how. Carson didn't keep fighting. Instead, he laughed out loud. He tried again and again, but couldn't get the words out because he was laughing so hard. The people in the crowd also laughed out loud. Even Ed McMahon couldn't help but laugh. The mistake wasn't what made it unique. It was how Carson felt about it. Not attempting to ignore or hide the mistake, he came clean about it. He laughed it off, and for the rest of the section, it became a running joke. How he really felt showed a part of himself. His friends loved that he was honest, laid back, and very human. Reports say that producers talked about cutting the section from future reruns because they thought it looked too rough. Carson, on the other hand, wouldn't cut it. The video clip is now a fan favorite. It shows that even experienced artists have bad nights, and sometimes those bad nights are the worst of their lives. 9. Don Rickles makes fun of Carson. Don Rickles didn't really appear on The Tonight Show. He took over it with insult humor that was so funny it made Carson cry. In one of their most famous conversations, Rickles started making fun of Carson quickly, talking about everything from how rich he was to how shy he was. When Carson wasn't in charge, he could only watch and laugh as Rickles destroyed the set with his funny antics. The crowd loved it, and Carson, who was supposed to be the target, also loved it. They had a very violent relationship. Carson would try to keep a straight face as Rickles made fun of his relationships, clothes, and even his partner, Ed McMahon. When Carson found out that Rickles had broken his cigarette box the night before, while on the show with Bob Newhart, they had a great conversation. During the live show, Carson jumped onto the set next to it, mic in hand, and criticized Rickles in person, making the roast a two-way street. Really crazy, and I will never forget it. 10. Ava Gabor Twister Part. In 1966, Johnny Carson made a strange new board game popular all over the country. But the effort scared the people at NBC. Carson had actress Ava Gabor play Twister on a live show of The Tonight Show. At the time, Twister was a new game that wasn't doing well in stores. What began as friendly chatter turned into one of the sexiest conversations in the history of The Tonight Show. The Wheel of Fortune was spun by Carson. As soon as Gabber stretched his back, he was on all fours crawling across her. People in the room laughed and gasped as her already low-cut dress fell even lower. It looked like the people at NBC didn't know how interesting the moment turned out to be. When it first aired, the whole segment was shown. But when it was shown again, it was cut down to remove the physical touch and stop complaints. But the harm was already done. Twister sales went through the roof overnight, and Carson and Gabber's sexy relationship became a hot topic at the water cooler. That's when Twister was saved, and late-night TV almost went crazy. 11. The Wedding of Tiny Tim. The Tonight Show changed from a late-night entertainment to a TV show on December 17, 1969, and it was so big that it got as many viewers as the moon landing. Tenor singer Tiny Tim, who is known for his falsetto and ukulele songs, married Miss Vicky Binger, 17, on the show that night. The set had 10,000 tulips from Holland, a 6-minute ceremony, and Carson acting like nothing was wrong as the newlyweds celebrated in front of a stunned live audience. At that time, 45 million people watched the episode, which was the most ever for an episode of The Tonight Show. Only Carson's farewell years later had more watchers. To give you an idea, more than twice as many Americans watched Prince William marry Kate Middleton. But producers at NBC were worried. Others were worried that the TP-like set, Tiny Tim's strange personality, and the dreamlike nature of the part would make the show look bad. Carson wasn't upset because he was a worker, but other staff members told each other they'd crossed a line. 8 years after their daughter Tulip was born, the pair got a divorce. Looking back on the experience, Miss Vicky said, "I was just a kid thinking, this will be fun." And it was. 12. Peter Popoff Scandal. In 1986, The Tonight Show took an unusual departure from comedy to investigative exposé. Johnny Carson himself, having been a magician, invited skeptic James the Amazing Randi to expose televangelist Peter Popoff, who claimed to get messages from God during his faith-healing crusades. Popoff would call out names, ailments, and personal details about members of the audience, claiming it was God speaking through him. But Randi had found the secret. Popoff was employing an earpiece hidden within his clothing, receiving real-time information from his wife backstage, who had obtained it from prayer cards filled out by attendees. On the air, Randi replayed tapes of Popoff's wife spooning him lines like, "She's got cancer of the uterus," and Popoffing back the same words verbatim moments later. The studio fell silent. Carson, visibly shaken, let the evidence speak for itself. The bit didn't just embarrass Popoff. It sent shockwaves through the televangelist community. NBC producers seemed to worry about outraged reaction from religious viewers. But Carson stood firm. It was one of the most powerful truth bombs ever detonated on late-night TV. 13. Raquel Welch walks off mid-inter. In one of the most cringe and dramatic Tonight Show moments ever, actress Raquel Welch stormed off the stage in the middle of an interview after an angry exchange with Johnny Carson. Welch, the embodiment of glamour and a hard-nosed personality to boot, was on to publicize a venture when Carson subjected her to a series of sarcastic remarks that she took as condescending and belittling. The tension mounted quickly, and Welch, seemingly fed up beyond words, stood up and walked out on stage before the bit was over. The audience was stunned. Carson, usually the master of comebacks, was shaken visibly. NBC producers seemed troubled by what had happened and refused to run the segment again for fear that it would hurt the reputation of Carson and the public image of Welch. It became one of those rare Tonight Show moments that appeared only once and was then quietly buried. This was not a celeb meltdown, but an instant that served to show Carson's charm to be restricted and live television to be unscripted. Welch's walk-off is the most dramatic exit in late-night TV history, and NBC's attempt to censor it only added to its mystique. 14. Carson's veto power. Behind the late-night spontaneity, he protected his image jealously. Carson had the ability to veto repeats of certain programs, especially those featuring awkward interviews, bombed jokes, or personally humiliating moments, according to a veteran NBC videotape engineer. Producers indulged his judgment even when it meant shelving entire broadcasts. But the real mystery runs deeper. In the early 1970s, hundreds of Tonight Show tapes from the 1960s were moved to Burbank and stored on temporary shelves. When a building manager tried to reclaim the space, he discreetly ordered that the tapes be taken to a dump and burned. Carson was furious when he learned of this, especially after he requested a 1968 clip that was now lost. He reportedly said, "If I had only known it was a matter of storage space, I would have gladly paid the $1,000 a month for a warehouse down the street." Carson had tight control over what was shown again, even though the tapes didn't belong to him. NBC owned them. The full list of shows he didn't want to be shown in reruns is either locked away at NBC or lost forever. There is now a polished, iconic version of Carson's legacy that was edited with care to keep the picture he wanted the world to see as it was. Thanks for seeing. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please follow and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Leave your ideas or questions in the comments if you have any. Please get in touch with us.